Hello and welcome to another video. Today is going to be the start of a new series, as you can probably tell by the 2 game reviews on wargaming products this week. I'm really enjoying wargames right now, and so I thought I'd like to learn a bit more about the vehicles involved in wargaming products. And so came the idea of the series about tanks, and so also came the idea of the first episode being on the Sherman Firefly. Now, the Sherman Firefly was a tank used by the United Kingdom in World War II. It was based on the US M4 Sherman, but was fitted with the very powerful 3-inch 76.2mm caliber British 17-pounder anti-tank gun as its main weapon. Overpowered much? It was originally designed as a stopgap until future British tank designs could come into service. The Sherman Firefly became the most common vehicle with the 17-pounder in the war. Though the British expected to have their own new tank models developed soon, British Major George Brighty championed the already rejected idea of mounting the 17-pounder in the existing Sherman. With the help of Lieutenant Colonel, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, it's spelled Colonel, Witheridge, and despite official disapproval, he managed to get the concept accepted. This proved to be a very good choice, as Challenger and Cromwell tanks experienced delays and further difficulties. After the problem of getting the gun to fitting the Sherman's turret was solved, the Firefly was put into production in early 1944 in time to equip the Field Marshal Montgomery's forces for the Normandy landings. It soon became highly valued as the only British tank capable of defeating the Panther and Tiger tanks, which it faced in Normandy at long range. In recognition of this, the Germans responded by telling their tank and anti-tank gun crews to attack the Sherman Fireflies first. Between 2100 and 2200 Fireflies were manufactured before production slowed down in 1945, because I'm not sure if it actually completely stopped. We'll just say slowed down. The British Army had made extensive use of the American-built Sherman tank. It was intended that a new generation of British tanks would replace it in the anti-tank role. First, there was the Cromwell tank, which was expected to use the Vickers high-velocity 75mm gun. This gun would have had superior anti-tank performance to the US 75mm and 76mm guns that were mounted in the Sherman. The second was the A30 Challenger, which was based on the Cromwell, but with the even more powerful 17-pounder gun. These two tanks and their successors, the Comet and the Centurion, which were already on the drawing board, were to have replaced the Sherman in British service, and so the prospect of spending time and money mounting a 17-pounder on the Sherman was not seen as desirable. Nonetheless, several unofficial attempts were made to upgrade the gun of the Sherman to that of the 17-pounder. The earliest attempt can be credited to Major George Brighty of the Royal Tank Regiment while he was at Lulworth Armoured Fighting School in early 1943. Bollocks. Despite the A30 Challenger undergoing initial trials at Lulworth, Brighty was convinced that the Sherman was a better mount for the 17-pounder. So this doesn't fuck up any of the electrics. Shouldn't do. But around June 1943, a colleague of Brighty, Lieutenant Colonel, I'm going to say Colonel, because I've heard it pronounced like that, George Witheridge of the Royal Tank Regiment arrived at Lulworth. A veteran of the North Africa campaign, Witheridge had experienced firsthand the lopsided battles between British tanks armed with 2-pounder guns against Rommel's formidable tank armies and anti-tank guns during the disastrous Battle of Gazala in mid-1942. Witheridge had been blown out of his Grant tank, and though he recovered from his wounds, he was declared unfit to return to combat duty. Instead, in January 1943, he was posted to Fort Knox in the United States for 6 months to advise on gunnery, where he was sold on American tanks. While at Lulworth, Witheridge inspected the A30 Challenger and joined in the chorus of complaints about the tank. Upon looking up Brighty and learning of his attempts to use the Sherman, Witheridge lent his assistance. He advised Brighty on methods to solve the recoil issue. Not long after this, Witheridge and Brighty received a notice from the Department of Tank Design, the DTD, to cease their efforts in trying to fit a 17-pounder gun to the turret of the Sherman, but unwilling to abandon the project, Witheridge, using his connections with such influential people as Major General Raymond Briggs, former GOC of the 1st Armoured Division in North Africa, and now Director of the Royal Armoured Corps, and successfully lobbied Cloud Gibb, Director General of Weapon and Instrument Production at the Ministry of Supply, to make it an official ministry project. In doing so, the endeavour to fit the 17-pounder gun to the Sherman was taken out of the hands of the highly enthusiastic and devoted amateurs at Lulworth, who had initiated it, and given to professional tank developers. So, how did it operate in battle? Well, to answer this, we're going to take a look at the Battle in Normandy, which is the first time they did operate, as far as I'm aware. Fireflies were introduced to armoured brigades and divisions in the 21st Army Group in 1944, just in time for the Normandy landings. The timing was fortunate as the Allies discovered that the Germans were fielding a much larger number of formidable tanks, such as the Panther, than had been expected in the Normandy theatre. In fact, the Allies had mistakenly assumed the Panther, like the Tiger, would be a rare heavy tank with a limited production run, rather than a total replacement for their medium tanks, and the larger than expected number of Panthers came as a nasty shock to the Allied commanders, as well as the tank crews forced to engage them with guns that could not penetrate the frontal armour at anything other than short range. Kentout, who served as a tank gunner and tank commander in the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry in Normandy in 1944, described the effect of mounting a 17-pounder in the Sherman. The Firefly tank is an ordinary Sherman, but in order to accommodate the immense breech of the 17-pounder and to store its massive shells, the co-driver has been eliminated and his little den has been used as storage space. The flash is so brilliant that both gunner and commander need to blink at the moment of firing. Otherwise, they will be blinded for so long that they will not see the shot hit the target. The muzzle flash spurts out so much flame that after a shot or two, the hedge or undergrowth in front of the tank is likely to start burning. When moving, the guns overlap in front or, if traversed, to the side, if so long that driver, gunner and commander have to be if traversed. When moving, the guns overlap in front or, if traversed to the side, is so long that the driver, gunner and commander have to be constantly alert to avoid wrapping the barrel around some apparently distant tree, defenceless lamppost, or inoffensive house. Fireflies were deployed as one tank per troop of Cromwell or Sherman tanks. The deployment with Cromwell troops made servicing and supply of those units more complex. The Firefly was also much slower than the Cromwell. Panthers and Tigers accounted for only 30% of the 2,300 German tanks deployed in Normandy, the rest being Panzer IVs, Sturmgeschütz 3s, and other tanks that the 75mm gun Shermans were able to effectively handle. However, the importance of Caen and Montgomery's operations, which pinned German armoured forces in front of the British positions so that American units could break out to the west, meant that British and Commonwealth units had to face over 70% of all German armour deployed during the Battle of Normandy, as well as over half of the elite, well-equipped Waffen SS Panzer units. As a result, the Sherman Firefly was perhaps the most valued tank by British and Commonwealth commanders, as it was the only tank in the British Army able to effectively defeat the Panthers and Tigers at the standard combat ranges in Normandy. The fact didn't go unnoticed by the Germans, who realised that these long-barrel Shermans posed a much greater threat to their their heavy tanks than the normal Shermans, and German tank crews and anti-tank crews did as instructed and tried to eliminate the Fireflies first. Similarly, the Firefly crews realised that the distinctive long barrel of their 17-pounder gun made the Firefly stand out from standard Shermans, so crews attempted to disguise their tanks to reduce the likelihood of being targeted. Some crews had the front half of the gun barrel painted white on the bottom and dark green or the original olive drab on the top to give the illusion of a shorter gun barrel. Another suggestion was for a shorter wooden dummy gun to be mounted on the rear of the turret and point forward. However, the tactic was not used in combat. Despite being a priority target, Fireflies appear to have had a statistically lower chance of being knocked out than standard Shermans. This was probably due more to how they were employed than to the actual effectiveness of the attempted camouflaging of the long barrel. Given the high value placed on Fireflies, a common tactic was for commanders to recognize. I can't pronounce that, so I'm just gonna say scout the battlefield before a battle to look for good hull down positions. During the battle, Firefly tanks would stay behind in those positions and cover the ordinary Shermans as they pushed forward, eliminating any enemy tanks that revealed themselves when they opened fire on the advancing Shermans, and only moving forward when the standard Shermans had secured the area, or when they could no longer cover the Shermans from their current position. Similarly, when on the move, troop commanders tended to position Fireflies in the rear to reduce the chance of them being knocked out. However, given the relatively unpredictable nature of battle, this setup was not always practical or possible, and many times Fireflies were forced to engage enemies in the open where they could be identified. Despite this, the Fireflies' increased power was much valued, and during many engagements, the Firefly proved its worth, knocking out tigers and panthers at long range. What am I saying? As well as less formidable tanks like the Mark IVs and the Stugs. One example of this increased firepower was displayed by Lieutenant General K. Henry's Firefly during the defence of Norrie and Bessing on 9th of June against an attack by the 3rd Company of the 12th SS Panzer Regiment of the 12th SS Panzer Division. Determined to capture the town in preparation for a larger offensive to drive back the British and Canadians into the sea, Kurt Meyer ordered an attack by 12 Canadians out of the town. Attack by 12 Panthers and of the 3rd Company and infantry to attack Norrie and drive the Canadians out of town. The attack got underway at 1300 hours, with the Panthers racing to the town at full speed, only stopping to fire their guns. They quickly outran the infantry support, which was forced to the ground by Allied artillery fire. Within 1,000 metres, 1,100 yards of the town, 9 Shermans of the 1st Hussars opened fire into the advancing Panthers' flanks. Lieutenant Henry's gunner, Trooper A. Chapman, waited until the Panthers lined up like ducks in a row and quickly knocked out 5 with just 6 rounds. The attack was repulsed with the loss of 7 of the 12 Panthers. In perhaps their most famous action, Fireflies from A Squadron, 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry, 33rd Armoured Brigade, A Squadron the Sherbrooke Fusiliers Regiment, 2nd Canadian Armoured Brigade, and B Squadron the 144th Regiment Royal Armoured Corps, 33rd Armoured Brigade, ambushed a group of 4 Tiger tanks from the 3rd Company and HQ Company. 101st SS Heavy Tank Battalion, supported by several Panzer IV tanks and Stug 4 assault guns, tanks of the 1st Northamptonshire Yeomanry and elements of the 51st Highland Division reached the French village of St. Aignan de Cramesnil on the morning of 8th August 1944 during Operation Totalize, while B Squadron stayed around the village. A and C squadrons moved further south into a wood called Del de la Roque. I think that's how you pronounce that. Yeah, this is French. Still. C Squadron positioned themselves on the east side of the woods, and the understrength A Squadron in the southern position with number 3 Troop on the western edge of the wood. From this position, they overlooked a large open section of ground and were able to watch as German tanks advanced up Route Nationale 158 from the town of Kintha, under strict orders from the troop commander, they held their fire until the German tanks were well within range. Ekins, the gunner of Sergeant Gordon's Sherman Firefly, Velikie Luki A Squadron's tanks were named after towns in the Soviet Union, had yet to fire his gun in action. With the Tiger tanks in range, the order was given to fire. What followed was an almost 12-minute battle that saw Ekins destroying all 3 Tigers that number 3 Troop could see. There are actually 7 Tiger tanks in the area, heading north along with some other tanks and self-propelled guns. A short time later, the main German counterattack was made in the direction of C Squadron. A Squadron, less Sergeant Gordon, who had been wounded and had already bailed out of the Firefly, moved over to support them, and in the resulting combat, Ekins destroyed a Panzer IV before his tank was hit and the crew were forced to bail out. One of the Tigers Ekins is credited with knocking out was that of Michael Whitman, though there is still some controversy over whether Ekins really killed Whitman, as Sherman Fireflies of the Sherbrooke Fusilier Regiment also fired at the Tigers from a closer range of 500 metres, or 550 yards. Anyway, that's all for this video. Leave a like if you enjoyed and you want me to carry on this series. There will be another episode of this tomorrow. No, I can't change it, I've already planned it. Really, so yeah. And as always, subscribe. What the fuck is wrong with my fucking... yeah. Subscribe.